Welcome to the audio podcast ministry of The Bridge. In all that we do, our priority is to lead all people from all places to be all in with Jesus. We hope that by providing this message in this way, it will be an encouragement to those of you who have already decided to follow Jesus, as well as a way home for those of you who have not yet said yes to Him. You can find out more, as well as support this ministry, by going to bridgeclarksville.com.
So yesterday we were talking about idols, continuing on in the series Summer Rules, going through the 10 Commandments. You were talking about things that we look to provide us sense of security or worth. And, I was thinking back as a kid, there were certain prized possessions that I had, even some as an adult, that I thought if something happened to them or if something went missing, it just crushed me. I couldn't do anything else. For me, it was like I loved Hot Wheels, and I had a ton of them. I had the carrying case, and I had all the setup and all that. Yeah. If you don't know what a Hot Wheel is, it's a little miniature car, and
that you'll never own.
Exactly. And there were a few that I would misplace or whatever at times, and I would tear the place apart looking for those, because those were the ones that brought such value. Did you have anything like that?
I had Hot Wheel cars for sure. I remember I wasn't a NASCAR fan, but I remember the Gatorade 88 car, an STP 43. I remember those. But that's easy. I'm a card collector. Still am, football cards. And so from kindergarten, I remember bringing my cards to school and trading and trying to get my guys. And I've got it's a pretty ridiculous collection. And they're all in a particular order. And if you were to come over today and just move one, I would sense it, and I would sense something's off in the universe, and I would probably identify it pretty quickly. That's my card collection for sure. Still, my Earl Campbell rookie card is still probably my favorite card, and I've got a lot of them graded, and so that's an easy one for me. I'm still that way. I'm a collector by heart. So antiques, cards, things that mean nothing to anyone but me. I'm still a collector. Probably got some old cassettes and albums that I would be pretty miffed if I couldn't find right now. So that's easy for me.
Yeah, those things are good. They're fun. There's nothing wrong with enjoying those kinds of things. But I believe that they can. Anything really that's a possession. And it doesn't just have to be that, but there are things in our life that we look to as of ultimate value or the greatest value, because we think, well, that is what really will bring me security or happiness, contentment, if I can pursue that. And you discussed how those kinds of things are like idols, and we may not necessarily have wooden carved images of gods, in our pockets or at home, but we have, in some ways, a misdefinition for who God is. But you had this great definition for an idol yesterday, and it was just simple. I hadn't heard this succinct of a definition before. You said idolatry is an attempt to make a god out of something that God has made. Right. And I think that helps us to really clearly understand, okay, anything here, it's got to be lesser than Him because He made it. But we still try to do that. We still look for those things in life. And you discussed pride as being a key issue with our idolatry. What is it that makes pride so dangerous in that area?
I think in some ways it's easy. It's easy to struggle with something that you can't see, can't touch, can't feel, which is why people always created these, idols in some respect. And I think when we create them, even if we bow to them, we still feel some sense of power over them, because after all, we made them, and if we don't like what they're doing, we can throw them in the fire and recreate. Now, granted, that was thousands of years ago, but the same kind of idea. Whereas with God, we can't do anything with him. If he does something that's counter to what we want him to do, we can't throw in the fire and start over. There's something in us that knows, like, he is who he is, and he's going to be who he is. So we have to submit ourselves to his character development instead of looking at something and thinking, well, I like this characteristic and I'm going to create this and that. God is God, and so it takes away our ability to control it, to fix it, to manipulate it, to even use it. We just have to live with it and live with him and under his authority. And I think that therein lies, for me, the challenge. We can't control him. We can't change his mind. There is one, maybe two. There may be two parts in Scripture where God changed his mind, where he relented something. He was going to do something, and he changed his mind as a result of the prayers of the people. But it wasn't changing his character or nature. It was just changing his activity within the story that was still going to ultimately get to where God wanted. So you don't change God. Whereas with these idols, you kind of create your own and imagine one up that is okay with everything you're doing or is helping you in the ways that you want to be helped, and refuses to answer the prayers of your enemy but somehow only answers yours. I mean, we can play all day with this idea of a God and what we want him to be, but I think that just that pride of, I can't control it, I can't do anything to change his character, I have to learn how to live under his rule, and that's an issue.
You know, I was thinking about our conversation now since your sermon yesterday, and that idea of wanting a God that will bless us. And I like how you put it. We want God to bless us but not mess with us. Mm-hmm. And that seems to have been an issue since the Garden of Eden. When you even look at Adam and Eve, they loved the blessing of the garden. Yeah. And they were deceived, of course. Well, God certainly didn't say, and so I want to eat this fruit from this tree. Right. And then you can trace that story all the way till today of just humanity wanting the blessing of a higher creator. We know God the Father, but really not wanting their lives to be overturned for him. So what is it about that idea, so much that even as believers in the church, that we still seem to struggle with God wanting him to bless us but not mess with us, instead of saying, God, you have the freedom to bless and mess with me, and that he doesn't necessarily mess with us, but that idea of, okay, whatever. Why even as believers are we still struggling with that?
Well, I think the very nature of an idol is it's impersonal. Whether it's wood or whether it's any other kind of material, it's impersonal. Whether it's a constellation, there's no interaction. There's just the opportunity to perhaps be benefited by its power, or whatever perceived power it is, where God is just the opposite. It's very personal, to the point where he desires to be heard, and is not that concerned with showing us himself as much as he is speaking to us, because we have to lean in. We have to get closer. When someone speaks to you, you have to lean in and create some form of intimacy. I think it's a lot like a relationship, and if you've been married, you know that. I mean, you get married because you want a partner, you want a helper, you don't want to be alone, you want to have a family, you want to be encouraged, you want someone to tell you it's going to be okay, and all those things that we look for in a marriage. Then you get into a marriage and realize ultimately it's about daily growing to become one, and that's not as easy as just let me do what I want to do when I come home, make sure I feel encouraged. Which is a little bit what we do with God. Let me do what I want to do, and then anytime I come into your house, I want to be encouraged and welcomed, and I want you to remind me of all the good things I've done and pat me on the back for my efforts and my intentions, even if I didn't follow through with them, as a result of doing the hard stuff of being honest, seeing your own character flaws, patiently allowing someone else to communicate. So it's that more of a relationship and less of this impersonal, hey, I'm using you, you're using me. You look good because you have more followers. I look good because you bless with me. We're entering into some sort of deal, and God's not interested in deals. And so I think maybe one of the reasons is the fact that even though we're a part of the church, those of us who are followers of Jesus, we're still being saved. We're still being perfected. We're not everything that God's created us to be yet. We're in the process. Even if we're already saved and our future is set, there's still that transformation that's going on in our lives. And we're still operating most of the time with other people who are basically our friends because they want something from us. I mean, very few of us have relationships with people who don't want anything from us. They just want to know us. They want to be with us. And most of us will cut off a relationship if it's no longer serving us. And we're a part of all those warped, very sin-filled relationships. And so the idea of trusting in a God that we're not with because we want to be blessed, we're with because we want Him to know us, we want to know Him the way He already knows who we are. And that's just so different and so difficult. Mm-hmm. And I think it, in a way, just carries on into our relationship with Him, which is why we imagine up characteristics that aren't even real. Just because the idea of a God who is not here to give me anything, but is here to receive something from me, that's tough.
Yeah, and you had a list of 10 items, and you probably could have kept going, that you shared, which are attributing a characteristic to God that He doesn't necessarily have. I thought that was a great point to bring out, that idols aren't just possessions. Like, oh, your idol's your job because you're always there, or it's money because you're this. And I think that's where a lot of sermons on that go. And that's true, but ultimately there's a root in our pursuit of idolatry, something deeper in our heart that's amiss. Mm-hmm. And so instead of aligning that then with, okay, well, who does God reveal Himself to be in Scripture, we then say, well, because this is off, this is who God should be, or who I want Him to be. And I can't remember all 10, sorry. But you had mentioned, a couple you mentioned was He's fair. That's an idol, an idolatrous view that everything about the world is fair. And if you're good, God will treat you good, and if you're bad, He won't. But yet we see in the world that that's not always it. And when we go to Scripture, we see that God calls the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. And then there's several others that you mentioned there that I was convicted of some in that I hadn't really even thought about. That's idolatry. Because I feel like I've done a pretty good job of submitting my calendar and my finances and those things. But then when I expect or define God in a way that He's not actually biblically defined, I've created a false God in that way. Can I get a little personal? Ask you a personal question?
Sure, we can always cut this.
Yeah, we can edit. So, as you're kind of going through that, were you identifying, was there anything there that kind of jived with yourself? Like, okay, this is something that I struggle with.
I think there probably everyone. I mean, speaking is therapy at times, and I have to be, you have to be careful when you teach the Bible that you're not just sitting on a couch in front of your friends going, here's what I struggle with. And it's, people can see through that, I guess, and that's okay to be transparent, but it can't always be about the speaker. So I'm sure within those 10 that I've come to a crossroads with most of, if not all of them, and maybe identified, whoa, wait a minute, like this didn't work out, and instead of being angry with God, just stepping back and thinking, well, why did I think God was going to do this? What was I thinking? How was I viewing Him that would make me put all of my eggs into this basket? And it still happens. I mean, I will pray and I will say, God, this date, this time, this way, I could not be more clear. And then in the end, I look up on that day, that time, and God just doesn't do it, And I'm thinking, well, what about all these verses? And so I have to step back and ask, why did I think this? And maybe it's the God of fairness of, well, maybe someone else was praying something else that God was going to answer, and it was both of those things can't go along at the same time, and maybe my time is coming, but it's just not now. And maybe the door is going to open, but it's not going to open until their door shuts because they just work together or whatever. I can't see the whole picture. All I can see is my struggle, my desire, or my want. And if I filter it through all of God's promises and feel good about it, and I mean, I expect it, but then when God doesn't, it just rocks you for a minute. So then you sit back and go, okay, what was I really thinking? What kind of characteristic did I feel like God was going to exercise when he answered the prayer? And sometimes I realized my view was pretty limited because it's based on my feelings, my experience, where I am, and it's hard to see all the glory of God when you're just, God, get me out of this, or fix this, or why would you not want to intervene and do this? And so I think it probably is all birthed out of those struggles that I've had at some point. And that's why the daily time with God for me is so important, because if I just go without spending time with him for a day, you just begin this process of drifting, and eventually you forget what he's like in a way, or you need to be reminded at least. And but the more I stay with him, the more I realize that this is him, this is his character, and the less likely I am to begin to chase down this image or mental idol that I've created in my mind that's not really him. Just like my kids, I mean, when they first got to know me at age, I would say when they were born, but they just saw blobs, but when they get to 1 or whatever and they realize this is Dad, and Dad gives me everything I need, at some point they have to get to know me a little more. Otherwise, for the rest of their lives, they're like, well, what's wrong with you? Why don't you give me this thing? Well, there's more to me, and there's more to us than that. But if that's all they know, then that's a challenge. I met Jesus when I was 7. I had very little I needed him to help me with. He just kind of wrapped his arms around me and said, I'll see you one day in heaven. I'm preparing a place for you. That was great. Then I get older and I'm running through other things. I need to know other aspects of his character and get to know him on a broader scale. And I think that probably translates over for all of our relationships with him.
Yeah. And I get sometimes, the pulpit's not the place to have your counseling sessions, but I hear from a lot of people in our church that they do appreciate the honesty that they hear from the pastors here. And I think it's important, because you had said early on in our conversation that as we mature and as we grow, we're going to see different areas of this. And it's almost just a warning in a way, if you will, like, hey, Pastor Chad still sees some of these, and he doesn't have all that figured out, and I didn't either. There's things like we've mentioned this before, or I have, but I really struggle with the idol of God will make everybody like me, at least within the church when I'm doing this thing, and so there are things that we still work through, and what it goes back to, this seems to be a theme of each of these podcasts, is, I'll at the end I'll say, okay, well, let's get practical. Like, what does it mean? And the majority of the time, it's you gotta listen to him. You need to be with him. You even said yesterday that it's more about, he's more concerned with us hearing from him than seeing him. And Jesus even said that much more blessed are those who haven't seen me but believe in me. So that question I was going to ask is, how do we then get to know the truth of who this God is to combat those lies? And you just mentioned, even now, probably the most important thing you do is tell him.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I've got nothing. I've got nothing to say. I've got nothing to teach. I'm no good to my family. I'm no good to my friends if I haven't first heard from God. I mean, it's tough, because when you're new in the faith, you want all of this, show me, reveal me, all this stuff. And that the more you walk with God, the more you realize, like, that it's just not that significant, it still boils down to just me being alone with my Maker, walking in as close as I can to my own little Eden with him, having no distractions, saying, God, I love you. If you do nothing for me today, I'm okay with it, but I am listening. my little phrase I've shared with you before and others. I begin every day with, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." From when Samuel was in the temple as a kid, he heard a voice. He thought it was the preacher in the temple. And after a few times, the priest realized, like, "Oh, wait, that's God talking to you." So next time he says it, you say this. And for me, I felt like that was a little prompt a few years ago to begin every day with that. And I don't have a great moment every day. There's definitely not a burning bush in my living room every day. But, he's got my attention. And the older I am, the longer I stay with him, everything just goes back to that time. And if I do anything in life worth remembering and make any difference in anyone's life, it's really just because I've spent time with him and I've gotten to know who he is and not who I've created him to be.
That's great. Simple, fundamental truth that sometimes we think, well, we can grow past that.
No.
So, thoughts on where we're heading this next Sunday?
Well, we're going to talk about the family dynamic of honoring our father and mother, which seems a little bit simplistic. But again, another thing, the longer I'm around, the more I realize that it's the challenge for a lot of people to honor what maybe has not been honorable to them. And whether it's an absentee father, whether it's a mother that didn't know Jesus, or it's not as simple. As a kid, I felt like that's the easiest commandment of all. Just don't talk back to your mom and dad. But there's a lot more to that, and there's a real reason I think why God puts that there as He reveals His character. So we're going to unpack that.
Awesome, looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us, and we do hope that we see you this Sunday as well.
We hope you will continue to stay connected with us by following this podcast and sharing it with your friends. For more information, go to bridgeclarksville.com.